and tell Jessel, which I think is fine, and gives. I'm like literally trying to record a video. Brooklyn. Hello, friends. We are here to review the latest episode of The Real Housewives of New York, season 14. Of course, I don't know what episode number it was. Today is the last day of the Renaissance World Tour, so we are giving. Period. This episode was a little bit slower. I think that the usual like procedure is like after you come down from like a lot of stuff, you kind of do like a filler episode. I don't necessarily feel like this was a filler episode, but it was a little bit slower. But I do like all the individual scenes that we got for all the housewives, like them with their families and doing other stuff. So I think that was, I mean, that's an important thing to see. So I like that. And then obviously we got some tea at the end of the episode, kind of in the middle, but more so the end. So we start out the episode with Jessel and Pavit, and they are talking. Jessel brings up the thing with Aaron, and basically they have to download from the trip. So she's letting him know, like, Aaron was still on this whole, like, calling her privilege thing. And I like that Jessel's getting the opportunity to, like, clarify and like see what's going on, because obviously we see this running narrative of mostly SIH and Aaron saying that Jessel's trying to compare situations and have a sad story because everybody else has a sad story, and they believe that she comes from a privileged background. So that could have easily played out throughout the season, and Jessel probably wouldn't have known about it or clocked it in full until the season was over, and then she only addresses it at the reunion. That could have easily happened, but it's not. So I'm liking that we get to see all perspectives at once during the season. She just brings up, like, Aaron's still trying to call me privileged. I'm in no way, shape, or form trying to compare myself to the other ladies. I don't want that to be a misunderstanding. And, I just don't understand where this whole privilege thing is coming from. Seems like Pavit agrees. She then kind of circles over to the SIH thing, and she more so is saying she wants to meet with SIH because she has also clocked that SIH is mostly the one that's feeling like, she was trying to compare situations when she was talking about her uncle, and SIH did that whole argument about the $0 in the bank account versus the 20. So she's like, I don't want SIH to think that I'm comparing. I want to have a lunch with her, and I want to clear that up. I can understand her wanting to clear it up, and I like that she's taking that initiative, because she could have just been like, bump SIH, I don't really care, which I think that she ultimately should, but we'll get to that. But, for the sake of the season and the dynamics of the group, it's nice that she's open to having that conversation. They kind of ended with Pavit telling Jessel that he has planned this staycation, which I think is super cute. And I'm down for a staycation, and he's playing a nanny, and they're gonna go have a good time. So I'm excited for that. I didn't really connect the dots that they could go on the staycation to reignite their physical flame, we'll call it. I don't even know if that was the intention, but it kind of turned into that. So that's cool. Great. Whatever. I did like the scene also, because, we were seeing everybody with their families. We've seen Jenna with her family before. This one wasn't necessarily her family, but it was seeing her in her element, I guess, so to speak. And she's at the gay bar with Bryn. So I thought that was a lot of fun. I liked that they gave it a lot of time. And we got some footage of, like, Jenna opening up and, like, talking to a girl at the bar, getting her number, dancing. So I thought that was fun as well. We then move on to Aaron and SIH's couples dinner that they have with their husbands. That's fun. I'm always down for a couple's dinner. Not my two favorite housewives. I was going to say two favorite couples, but I don't know their husbands like that, so no shade to them. But not my two favorite housewives, but, cute, whatever. We've been seeing this clip forever. The whole thing where Aaron asked, if your wife didn't have physical intimacy with you. I don't want to say the S word. I don't know what YouTube gives for that. So that's why I'm like stumbling over the word like a little kid. But she asked a question like, if your partner didn't have physical intimacy with you for 2 years, what would you do? And her husband immediately is like, I would sleep with other women. So like I said, we saw the clip a lot, so I was thinking that was going to be the key. But the more I saw the clip, like for the 5th time, I'm just thinking like, honestly, when I thought more about it, not more so about the shade to Jessel, but just like him saying it, I'm like, that says way more about him than it says about Jessel. But then it got even worse because Aaron clocked that too, which I guess is good. Like, but it was like, that was weird. But then she circles around and she's like, well, I would sleep with another man too. So I'm like, type of relationship y'all in. You know what I'm saying? Like that might be I guess a real conversation, and just being real about it, then fine. But that's interesting to say, especially on a couple's dinner on national television. And then we segue into them like discussing down the line having alternatives to monogamy and welcoming other people into their bedroom and things like that. In the event, Aaron characterizes it as like it's something they would do to reignite that flame down the line. Like she's open to do anything to reignite that flame because she doesn't want to be in a situation where she doesn't have intimacy with her husband. That's a big thing. Yeah, I do agree that intimacy is a big thing. And I do like at least that they're saying, right now we're into monogamy, but maybe we'll explore other things later. So sure, they seem like they've had more conversations about it than I probably would have imagined. They kind of seem like their foot is already in that door. So I don't know if it's more so like we're monogamous now, but we'll see what happens later. Because I think they've already planned for what's going to happen later. So I think that's interesting. The biggest thing I thought was interesting, though, is like, A, that Erin even clocked that it was weird that her husband said he would sleep with other people. But B, she's like, well, that's crazy. Like, what if I was going through something? And that's a weird parallel because it's like, well, Jessel was going through something. And she did explain that to you guys when you went to the Hamptons. But this narrative has gone all the way on until 5 episodes later. We're talking about it right now in a Kiki manner. So, I really liked the event that Uber was throwing, like the healing event. It wasn't like necessarily tied to anything or like cliched or like overly produced to like make sense. I think it was just an event that she was having. There was some explanation there, but it was just a nice event to have, whatever, to get the ladies together. Obviously, there wasn't really any event to get an all cast event going or any other reason right now since they just came off the trip. And I don't know necessarily that they needed an all cast, but it seems like they're trying to make it happen as much as possible. They meet all together a lot. So it was nice to get like an all cast event plus like individual stories throughout this whole episode. Of course, SIH is there being negative in her confessionals, and she's just like, she seems like such a pleasant person, like when she's filming, and she's in the moment, and she's respectful, she's nice, she's got her hellos, she's got her thank yous, but she's in her confessional, like, she doesn't like it, and she isn't healing anything because she's fine. I'm hoping that she was being sarcastic when she was saying that, but something in me tells me that she wasn't. But at the end of the event, we get Jessel, do what she said that she was going to do with Pavitt. She asked SIH, does she want to go to lunch? SIH, again, in person, seems super pleasant and super open to it. Not like, oh my God, yeah, but she was just like, yeah, fine, whatever. But in her confessional, she's like, I don't want to go to lunch. Like, I don't know what we have to talk about. So I think this, obviously that was my assessment earlier when I was like, these ladies tend to feel some type of way about one another, and then they kind of drag it on, and it just never really resolves for no reason at all. But this is like concrete evidence now that SIH just like, because there's absolutely no reason for her to be so like negative as it pertains to linking up with Jessel. Like, it's just not that deep. So I think this says, again, way more about her than it says about Jessel. The lunch to me was interesting. So they set the scene, SIH is outside of lunch. She's on the phone. There's no context to the phone conversation, but it's just kind of like, I'll let you know what happens. And then she goes into the episode. But the producers or editors make a point to show that she walked into the lunch 20 minutes late. So I don't know if maybe she was there on time and had already waited that 20 minutes and was having that call, then went to sit down, or if she was actually 20 minutes late. I say that because obviously we get more of a scene where she's waiting for Jessel, and then Jessel comes about 40-something minutes late. So, I'm just like being a math girl. If Jessel had been 40 minutes late and SIH was 20 minutes late, then it's just a 20-minute difference, meaning that SIH only waited for 20 minutes. But if she had indeed showed up on time, then she did wait the 40 minutes. So I'm just saying, obviously you see the picture I'm trying to paint here. I don't think it's a big deal to have to wait for 20 minutes. I mean, having to wait, yes, take that into account. It's like, you did invite me here, but 20 minutes is not a big deal. 40 minutes, yes, for sure. But also, living in New York, knowing the commute, knowing how things happen, I understand. And from the way that Jessel was saying it, she's like, I didn't know it was going to take me this long. I was in the car for 45 minutes, and she only picked that place because she thought it would be convenient for SIH. So I don't think it went without her knowing, like, dang, I'm late, I messed up. Like, she was apologetic as soon as she walked in, but she definitely could have like texted SAI or called SAI while she was in the act of being late. But at the end of the day, if it was only a 20-minute thing, then I think SAI can just shut up. SAI also complains because she's like, I got stuff to do today, whatever. And she's like, typically I do stuff on the weekend. And Jess was like, it's Friday, which I understand. Like, Friday is still a work day, but it is the start of the weekend as well. So, I mean, and you took the lunch. So I don't really see why complain about the day if you already confirmed to be there and you're there. So if you were going to complain about the day, then you should have just said that. And I'm sure you guys could have pushed it back 24 hours. Like, shut up again. So this is the day after Jessel and Pavitt's staycation. So she lets, SAI know that she doesn't necessarily go into detail. I don't know why she would have to go into like intimate detail about what happens, but she does tell her, because I believe SAI asks, like, yeah, they reignited that physical flame, right, that everybody was so curious about. But she doesn't give a bunch of detail, so that leads SAI to think like, oh, well, I don't really think that they, reignited that flame. I think she's just saying that to satisfy us. So it's just like, I don't know, like, when SAI and Jessel dated back in the day and Jessel cheated on SAI to cause all of this, like, distrust and insecurity, because it just doesn't make sense. Like, no matter what Jessel says, it's just always an issue. And that's some super weird behavior. And then SAI asking more questions. That's another thing. Like, she asks, because when they did the replay back to like the well, we're about to get there. But when they did the replay back to like the uncle situation where SAI felt like Jessel was comparing, I hadn't realized that SAI was asking her those questions and Jessel was responding. So again, we've got SAI asking Jessel more questions, and she's like, she asked her, did you guys reignite that flame? Now she's asking her, why is your husband going to Vietnam? So it's just so curious to me that you can ask so many questions and then pick apart the answers. Like, this isn't voluntary information that Jessel's giving you. You're asking for this information and you just don't like the answers that you're receiving. I think that that's so weird. But she asked about, why he's going to Vietnam. Jessel's like, yeah, he's just going for like 24 hours. He does this thing where he goes to get the miles for, I guess, for flying. I would assume, obviously. I don't think that that's weird necessarily for me. I mean, it's not something that I would do, but I know that there are people out here that are very, like, serious about their frequent flyer miles, and they do certain stuff. And he had already explained to Jessel before in the episode that he was going to Vietnam just for like a little getaway. So that sufficed. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that his sole reasoning, like, I don't think he went to his wife and was like, hey babe, got to get some miles for American Airlines, so I'm going to go to Vietnam for about 24 hours. We know that's not how it happened because we saw it. So I guess to SAI's credit, she doesn't know that. That's the only reason that Jessel gave her. So I can see how it sounds unfamiliar, but it's not gonna like light a light bulb in me to lead me to like the Pavitt is cheating or possibly cheating storyline that's about to start happening that I'm just not happy to see. It's just like, come on now, be for real. But that's where SAI is. She makes her little kiki about him going to Vietnam for frequent flyer miles, but we'll see how that plays out. Finally, we get to the meat of this lunch, and Jessel just says, hey, I feel like there was a misunderstanding when we spoke, and I think that you guys feel like I'm trying to compare. So not only am I trying to clarify that I'm not trying to compare, I want you to know that I'm clear that our situations are not the same, and also I want to apologize. So I feel like she hit every mark there, and SAI, her only response is, I don't care. Which is so weird because it's like, this is my 5th time repeating it in one of these videos. It's like, you were just screaming at me on the boat about how you feel like my stories are BS, and then you were also having conversations with the other ladies, and you were also having conversations with America, like Bernie Mac and your confessionals, and you're like, Jessel's trying to compare. So you obviously care, you know what I'm saying? But she's trying to justify it and tell Jessel, which I think is fine, and gives... I'm like literally trying to record a video. Brooklyn. But, she tries to clarify with Jessel, which I think is fine, without knowing that she actually did have an issue. If she didn't actually have an issue, then I think that this response would have made sense, but it doesn't. But whatever. So she, she says, I don't care. Like, I wasn't offended by that, because Jessel says, I don't want to offend you. She's like, I'm not offended by it. At the end of the day, we're in a group where if we hear things and the story doesn't make sense, we're going to probe and ask more questions. And, she further clarifies SIH, and she's like, I'm very curious. So I think that that's fine and that will make sense. And then she also takes accountability and says, sometimes I can be abrasive. So when I'm doing that, I don't really notice it. So I apologize for that. So I thought that was good, but it's still, it would have been better if we didn't know that she was so in a huff and a puff about it. Like, that would have been relevant if it was actually relevant, but it's not relevant. I like that. I'm always surprised. Like, I just feel like Jessel could definitely fall into the BS of it because she doesn't have the outside lens that we have where we can see everything, because Sai definitely says more in her confessionals. But I feel like Jessel just knows what's going on, and she's even like, I didn't expect for Sai to be so cold, because she could have easily bought that explanation that, Sai's like, I'm just curious, I'm just asking questions. She could have easily bought that, and she didn't. So I'm happy that she didn't. She's like, Sai's being cold, and I'm like, yeah, she is just coming off very, it just keeps changing for me. Like, abrasive is one thing, dismissive is another thing, negative is another thing, but also then like mean spirited. And I just feel like it continues to elevate. And from the previews that we've seen, it doesn't seem like it's gonna get any better. So I struggle to understand what is size T. Like, I don't know. But ultimately, they have this conversation. It has its productive points, but Sai is just like, you could have phoned me and told me that. Like, it's not a big deal. And it feels like then she tries to give Jessel some notes. She's like, well, it's just because you're... Two things that I felt like contradicted themselves, because she tells Jessel that she's not being vulnerable, but in this moment, Jessel's crying. But she tells Jessel she's not being vulnerable, but then says, because, like, the story will start with A and then we'll end up over at C, and I'm just not understanding where the story is going. Those are two separate issues. Like, you feeling like Jessel is not vulnerable has zero to do with feeling like her story is all over the place. Is she not vulnerable and not saying enough? Or is she saying too much and rambling? Like, which one is it? Because you're saying both. So I clocked BS on that. And I just thought it was interesting, her trying to drive this narrative that Jessel's not being upfront and being forthcoming. And she's just like, just own it. And she says that a lot. And I'm just like, what are you asking her to own? And I wish that Jessel would have dove more into that, because what are you asking me to own? Like, I'm not understanding. Own that you're negative and you just don't like the answers that I give you, because we've owned that. We already signed that deed. Like, we know. So what do you want her to own? I'm confused. And Sai is just so convinced that what she's saying makes sense. And the more interesting thing is, I feel like she's giving us more concrete evidence to the fact that she's just been coming for Jessel and being a mean girl, because she even verbatim says, like, you notice when you own things, like, nobody comes for you. And it's like, so you're admitting that you've been coming for me because you feel like I'm not owning things? Like, you're listening to what you're saying, right? But I like Jessel's explanation at the end of the day that, hey, like, it feels like, she tells her specifically, like, you and Aaron kind of feel like vultures and you pick apart everything I say. So don't you understand that it puts me in a position where it's hard for me to, like, open up, because I'm already not a super open person. So then I'm trying to open up to you guys and you pick apart everything that I say. So that's probably why my stories are so roundabout. But Sai's not trying to hear it, and, at the end of the day, she doesn't care. She doesn't care about anything. That's Sai's persona. She's the Grinch who stole happiness. And she's like, well, I'm going to go. So whatever, she leaves. And honestly, that's my favorite thing that she does. I'm excited to see where this goes. Like, we got a very, I feel like, explosive preview into, like, what's coming up next. And obviously things with Sai and Jessel are going to really come to a head. I'm interested, not really to see where they stand on it, because we know that, and I feel like this was bubbling up. And I'm glad that, Jessel is standing up for herself and clocking the BS. But I'm more interested to see the perspective of the other ladies and kind of where that falls, because it can definitely be very finicky. And, I just hate that Sai is coming off very just like ill, like just a super mean girl. And it's weird because that's such a big thing to have to say. Like I know it comes off like a kiki in the review, and I said this a long time ago, like episode 2, that SIH and Aaron and sometimes Bryn can come off as mean girls. But then to see now down the season, after half of the season, that Jessel is calling it out in living color, it's like, well dang, like it sucks because it's clear, like, right, it's one thing for it to be clear to the viewers because we only see portions, and we're watching a show, we don't really get the full story, but then you get people that are actually living it and they feel that same way. So it's just an interesting thing to see, and it's unfortunate to come off as a mean girl as a grown woman on television. So I mean, we'll see. I'm more excited about just Jessel owning her own and being herself and not taking BS from like people like Sai and Aaron. So we'll see what happens next. I will see y'all in the next episode.